Hello and welcome to Tattered Cover. This is a live stream event and we might be having some problems tonight, but I'll keep an update. If you're having problems, just let us know in the YouTube chat and I will problem solve behind the scenes. I just want to start off with that. We're a year and a half into a pandemic and we're still having virtual event issues. It happens. We're going to move on. Thank you for joining us. If you don't know who Tattered Cover is or what we're about, Tattered Cover is a 50-year-old bookstore. We have been around for half a century. My name is Adam. I'm the director of events with Tattered Cover. We're in Denver. We're one of the largest independent bookstores. And it's thanks to readers like you that we can say that we've been around for 50 years. So thank you so much. I'm going to get right into it because we have an amazing event. I want to give them all the time in the world, but I will highlight two things. One, if you need closed captioning, it's at the bottom of your YouTube screen. There's a black bar that says CC. Just click it and you will have closed captioning. And then some upcoming events you can check out at tatteredcover.com/events. We have Jay Coles, who's an amazing YA author, coming up next week. And then we have, weirdly, two CNN reporters on separate nights. We have Anderson Cooper, and then we have Keith Boykin. So if you're interested in politics, which I feel we all should be, especially at a time like this, check that out. But tonight, we are here to celebrate an amazing writer, musician, person who has a new book out. I'm, of course, talking about Josh Ritter, who was in conversation with Matt Bell tonight. Josh Ritter is a singer and novelist from Moscow, Idaho. His albums include The Animal Years and So Runs the World Away. Bright Passages was his first novel. He has a new novel out tonight, which I will let them introduce in a few seconds. He currently lives in New York. And then Matt Bell, who he's in conversation, is the author of several novels, most recently Appleseed, and then there's Scrapper and In the House, Upon the Dirt, Between the Lake and the Woods, as well as a short story collection, A Tree or a Person or a Wall, and then a nonfiction book about a classic video game, Baldur's Gate 2, and several other titles. His writing has appeared all over. He's from Michigan and currently teaches at Arizona State, my alma mater, so I'm glad to see him here. But please welcome Josh Ritter and Matt Bell, who will be talking about the glorious goddamn of it all. Josh and Matt, please join us virtually.
Hello.
Hey, Josh, how are you?
Good. How's it going, man?
Good. So good to be here with you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to get to talk about your book. Thanks to everybody who's here. Thanks to Tattered Cover for having us. Thanks to Adam for hosting. It's my pleasure to get to introduce Josh Ritter tonight and to talk to him about the great, glorious goddamn of it all. Maybe the best titled novel of the year. There's just no way to say this big title without feeling the joy of it. It's such a perfect fit for this big feeling, tall tale of a novel. I want to say the title as often as I can, so I'm probably going to try to get away with it a few times. The Great Glorious Goddamn of It All is a new American folktale set in the fictional logging town of Cordelia, Idaho, at the tail end of a great age of lumberjacks. It's a coming of age story about fathers and sons. It's a tale of facing down the devil, or at least the devil in human form, betting big and gambling everything you got left to lose. It's about first love and first all-night drunks, about found families and the companionship of men who work together. It's a novel about growing old and about songs you can't forget. It's an adventure story, a new American myth set in a time when one America is giving way to another. It is, I think, about a great, glorious goddamn of a lot. Josh, I love this book.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you so much. Oh, that's amazing.
It really is just such a fun book to talk about. And, one of the first things I noticed, I think everyone would notice about the great, glorious goddamn of it all is the incredibly rambunctious, rambling voice that's told in. Weldon, the protagonist, is a great speaker and storyteller, and I immediately fell in love with his way of speaking. On the very first page, there's a description of Joe Moffro, the antagonist in the book's frame story, as a short-necked, spindle-armed, light beer-drinking, milk-chasing, fast food-smelling, big-talking, nervous, guffawing, flabby-handled, freeloading, sideways-glancing, barrel-chested, jolly, wheezingly poor a substitute for the Grim Reaper as fate could supply. As soon as I read that, I was like, it's the first page of the book. I'm like dog-earing and highlighting. And I was like, there's no way to read that sentence without grinning. And I sort of just immediately fell in love with the book and knew that I was going to go wherever Weldon wanted to take me.
Thank you.
I'd love to just hear how you sort of discovered Weldon's voice, how you found the voice of this book, which is, I think, quite a bit different than Bright's Passage.
Yeah, they are. Thank you. It's like Yeah, it was very interesting. I really I've learned that with music as well, that the project that I've worked on in the past informs the next project, you know, in so many ways. And what I realized with Bright's Passage and with spending a lot more time with it was that I wanted to write a book that was really fun.
Hmm.
I wanted to write a fun book. Like I thought, like that's my biggest goal, is that there'll be something that if I'm reading it, there's something fun on every page for me to read, and like that was like what I wanted to do because like I thought there are other kinds of ways to make something beautiful, but like but to make it fun is really is really I feel like a high bar to set and yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to write.
Yeah. How did you keep that sort of fun up while you were writing? I mean, I feel like, some
Yeah,
days are fun writing and sometimes they're not. And what's fun for the writer isn't always fun for the reader. But I mean, I
yeah.
agree. Like the fun here is like, it is something like wondrous or interesting or hilarious, like every page.
Thank you. Like I think that the keeping the fun up was like it was interesting because I spent a lot of time with this during this novel not writing. You know, I was you know I was working on music and I was raising two little kids and like it was just very busy and you know the times that I would write I would pick it up obsessively for a couple months here and there
Mm,
and I think because of that the book itself is a distillation of the time I spent working on it. You know, I was able to spend concentrated time working on it and observing it, and then I would come back to it, and it would have changed in my mind, and it
mhm.
was a really satisfying process. Yeah,
Do you think that did that affect like how like it's obviously being told in a sort of oral way, right? It has a much more like sort of
yeah.
oral spelling thing. You think that concentratedness like lent itself to that in some ways? I mean, there is a sort of like spokenness to it, as opposed to like a written document in a certain way.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think that definitely there was there. I feel like there's only so long that in my power that I have to continue a monologue,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that's like without and like there are other writers who can do it for a really like a long time, but like I feel like that was the length of time that I felt like I could stay at the party and it would and still and you know and not outstay my welcome.
Yeah, that makes sense. I
Yeah,
feel like
yeah.
the structure of the book with the sort of past and present gives you those places to like rest and reset and to tell from again in a way that,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah,
that keeps you
yeah.
from having to just like tell a 300 page like bar story or something, right?
Well, and I love that about your book as well, like about Appleseed as well, that you took these time outs for these mythic moments that
Right.
were just really like so important for telling the rest of the story. It was so cool.
Yeah, it's always interesting to sort of find your places to break. I think I and obviously that's part of like music, right? Songwriting, you obviously have changes to parts of the song. It's not all just one, usually not one continuous thing. I think when I first started writing, I thought like I just wanted it to be like up here nonstop for like the whole time, and like
Hmm,
it's
hmm.
actually not that pleasurable, right? You need like textural sort of changes in that way.
Totally.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, I've always thought like that you know since I started writing longer form there was something like that didn't quite line up with me about a song being like a novel. I think that a novel is more like a whole show. A
Hmm.
novel has like the rise and fall of a number of different dynamic moments. And like those dynamic moments end up telling us a larger story, you know, over the course of an evening, over the course of an hour and a half or whatever. And that like you know that can be achieved that kind of dynamic rise and fall over the course of a novel, but it does mean you have to like shift shift your dynamics in big
Hmm.
ways to like keep it interesting to me and myself, you know, like to feel like it's still. So I think that was how I approached writing it, was like making sure that the voice was dynamic and telling a story that was always shifting and always had something new and some
Hmm.
little element that came in that was interesting.
Yeah, I hope if there's writers listening to us on the live stream, they hear that comparison of like a set list as opposed to like an album. I think that, you know, books are often compared to
Yeah.
like albums and things, but a set list is a different thing, right? And I think that
Yeah.
the way that like the arrangement of all these interesting things tells that story or makes the experience of like a show seems actually more apt to me. I think that's really useful, and I hadn't ever thought of it that way.
It really
That's great.
feels if it feels that way, and I notice, you know, just I think maybe because I just intrinsically I seem to always go back to musical metaphors, but I do think that like I've always noticed that the shows I like, you know, give some sort of like leeway to the audience to like find some repose, and like they're like you say, they're not always playing at 11.
Right.
You know, yeah, there's a shifting there here and there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Would you want to read to us a little bit? Can we hear a
Sure,
little
yeah.
bit? Yeah, let's do it. Thank you.
All right. This is like this is early in the book. Uh, Weldon is a guy who has had two mortal enemies. One of them is Joe Mufro, and he's like he's the spindle arm fast food smelling Jolly Weezer that I was talking about, and then the other is Lyndon Laughlin, and Lyndon Laughlin is another type of arch enemy entirely, and I'll read you a little bit about him. This is from Weldon's point of view. Lyndon Laughlin came from Canada, maybe, or sometimes from Maine. He spoke with an accent, but of what kind no one knew. A few soup bones said they'd seen him raising hell in Saginaw in the 1880s, but that was decades ago, and surely he must have died a long time hence. Maybe he wasn't a man at all, but a graybeard, or the kind of forest spirit that the witch who lived with us was always casting her spells against. Lyndon Laughlin could kick the ceiling with his spiked boots. He was 7 feet tall and had 3 rows of teeth. He could bite through a hatchet handle, not like he ever used a hatchet. Lyndon Laughlin's axe could chop down trees all by itself. One time, at a dance in Vancouver or Aroostook, he got to jigging so hard that he danced right through the floor. One time, someone, somewhere, was skidding logs and got them so mired in the mud that 2 teams of oxen couldn't pry them free. Lyndon Laughlin came along and just looked at those logs and started walking toward them. With every step he took, those logs got a little smaller and a little smaller until he finally got up to them. They were so small he just pulled them up under his arm and carried them down to the sawmill. And not only that, as a woods boss, he could strike fear and respect into the steeliest of hearts and lead a flog of jacks up any mountain with the knowledge that the timber would get taken out and pronto. He knew which way the trees would fall, and his uncanny knowing was a comfort to a man as surely as it was a source of trepidation. Some said he'd signed his name in a black cat book and sold his soul to the devil for 666,000 years. Some said he was a friend to orphans and women, others that he'd climbed up out of the very cleft of a cloven hoof. No matter what anyone said about him, though, everybody agreed that Lyndon Laughlin was the best Jack that had ever lived.
Yeah. I'm so glad you read that part. Lyndon's such a great character. It's such a great introduction to him.
Thank you.
You know, listening to you read it, it's funny because I have that like same like part of that same quote in my notes, and listening to you read it, thinking about all the things about him that are like scary or funny or sort of like the dancing part is like a totally different kind of thing from like this sort of multitude of sort of legends that are sort of attracted to him. Can you talk about where Lyndon came from? Is there do you think of him as like a devil figure, a trickster figure? Are there other like characters like that you're sort of attracted to?
Yeah, that's a really good question. You know, like he struck me as like, and what struck me about him was that he was the type of like he's a character that I made up, but the stories that are like attracted to him, or he's an amalgam of all this lumberjack lore and all this stuff, and like he's this guy that everything has, like you said, attached to him, and I found that like to be fascinating with the lumberjacks, that I was bringing them all together and I could give each one of them their own separate mythology, you know. And I didn't have to make the big mythologies. I could just make it a few lines, like there's one guy, Jelly Jacobson, that can jump 10 feet in the air, you know, or like there's Oral Avery who gets struck by lightning and he's then an insomniac. You know, that, and
Right.
it's fun. It's fun. Like they don't have to have major histories, but they're fun to like. They filigree the legend of the, and that's what happens with Lyndon Laughlin is his all these separate like rumors about him, and you know are they filigree his legend.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's Filigree the Legend is so nice. There's a way in which when you give a character like lots of attributes or contradictory attributes, they become like ambiguous in a really pleasurable way, right? They're like hard to see in total because they're sort of like
Yes.
masked by the legend in a way that makes
Yeah.
him more mysterious than like the average like villain, maybe in like a different kind of story, because there is sort of this like it's hard to see him in one piece. You know, there's sort of a multitude
Yeah.
that keeps him moving in a certain way. That's really interesting.
He was a fun villain to write because there was portions of the things that he would say that I had no idea he would say until he said them, and that was the same with Weldon as well. Like there was just times when I sat down to write, and Weldon was there. And said the most outlandish things, you know, and stuff that I wouldn't end up writing, you know, like because it was just too filthy, you know. Yeah.
There is
Just
a
too.
fun, I think, apology to maybe your mother and your acknowledgments about all the
Yeah.
cursing in the book.
Yeah. The cursing, it was like, you know, and it landed on, it landed, like, you know, like just a meteorite
Right.
full of cursing. It's so fun.
I have like a really small question about the Linden Prairie Red. When you're talking
Yeah.
about Saginaw at the beginning of that, is that Saginaw, Michigan?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's where I'm from, like 10 minutes from there. So like it was
That's
like
so
little
cool.
Matt Bell Easter egg. I was reading the book. I was like, oh, nice of Josh to put my, old
That's
stomping
awesome.
grounds in this book for me,
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I would, in my reading, I was reading like a whole bunch of kind of not just lumberjack lore, but just sort of local lore and legend, and for some reason, Saginaw is one of those towns where like it just seemed like anything could happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything was always happening in Saginaw, which is like so I
And it
had to
has,
make sure
but
I
it
paid
has
attention.
it has a good sound, right? It's unique. Like there's like one
Yeah,
place called that, it has, yeah, it
yeah.
has I grew up in a small town called Hemlock, which was also a logging town for hemlock trees, and now there are like none there,
Wow.
right? So it's like named
Yeah,
after the
right.
thing that's missing because of the
Right,
logging.
right.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, a different landscape than
Wow.
yours, but maybe some similar things,
For sure.
Yeah.
Totally.
Um, while you were talking a little bit about some of the other lumberjacks, and I wanted to come back to talk about them because when you and I spoke earlier this summer before I'd read the novel, I think in our first conversation ever, we were just talking about like doing historical research and making things up and discovering characters. And you were talking about how much fun you'd had making up lumberjack names, that this had been like a
Yeah.
particular source of pleasure. And there's some of my favorites. There's the main characters we've talked about is Peg Ramsey and Bud Maynard, Unto Sisson, Lyle Llewellyn, Allwright Edwards, and his butler Thorough, which I just like love some of these names. The Weldon sort of romantic interest is this woman named Annie, who at one point he goes looking for, and he gets to like the Brights and he can't find her. He asks after her, and the woman he's talking to says, "Do you mean Honeysuckle Annie, Dynamite Annie, Switchblade Annie, Kitchen Annie?" And she's none of those Annies, right? I mean, like, there's just so much joy in the names here, and
Thank you. Yeah.
what was that? I mean, obviously you're just having fun. I can see your sort of glee about it, but like,
Yeah.
how did you come up with a ton of names? Were you sort of just making them up as you went? Is there a secret to the lumberjack name?
Yeah, good. That's really true. Like, there's like, you're right. I had a tremendous amount of fun with the names, and it was fun because I've always thought like there's like a muscle for songwriting where if you can sit still long enough for a sec, you can dilate this muscle and the image flies through it, and
Mm.
the image makes it like, but it's a dilation like the iris. And I feel that way about names too. It's like if you're quiet for a second, then the name jumps up at you,
Mm.
and that happened with all of these characters. Like it was, once they had a name, I had to write them down, because they were so much fun. They were so much fun to write, and also the names really created an ecosystem that I felt like was important for the book. There were other characters that were in earlier drafts of the book, and that I had to like get rid of, but they were still there, and they were still having
Mhm.
like they were still on the fringes, of your world,
Mhm. Yeah, you have a phrase for, like, is it Jack Johnsons, like
Yeah,
sort of lumberjacks whose names you don't know, like all the like average Jack Johnsons around.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, it does a lot of work of just like filling out like the community in a certain way.
That's
That's
right. Yeah. Well, because I one of the daunting parts for me about this book was that, like, with Bright's Passage, I was dealing with one main character,
right.
and like kind of his travel through a landscape. So, and in terms of like, when I was working with like a larger group of characters, it was just more. It just felt in my mind, it was like a more ambitious
Yeah.
task. And like, yeah, like, because every time they have an interaction, you've got to have it be like true and feel right, and not be
Mhm.
embarrassing, and like not be like dialogue that makes you feel all weird,
Yeah,
for whatever reason.
it's funny, I think you're talking about both like the dilation where an idea comes through, and then also like waiting for the character to speak, and the character sort of speaks in like a way you didn't expect, and just sort of following that. It
Yeah,
feels
yeah,
like, I think names and dialogue are things that jam writers all the time. This, like, you give up some like control, like you name something, it's a
yeah,
little wild, right? I think like person starts acting on their own once you know they're named. They're a
yeah.
butler named Thorough. They become like a thing that you don't right know anymore. And
You're so right. It's a kind of a
interesting.
scary thing to like. You're right about that. And like, I guess I always took like, I always like, have always loved the Tom Robbins,
Yeah.
that approach to naming, which is that like, and in our daughter's names, and like like there's something about like this going for broke
Yeah.
when you're naming, it's so fun.
Yeah, there's
And,
like
and
I mean, like naturalism is like one goal, and then there's also like this is a character in a story. Like,
And
right?
these characters, like these lumberjacks in this story, they may not see themselves as characters, but they like fulfill this role of being like these outsized characters in this boy's imagination, and to him, like, their names may be like, their names may be like, whatever, really normal names, but
Right.
to him, they're immense names, and they're like all that he has of like heroes.
Yeah. I have
Yeah,
a I guess it's really my dad's cousin, so like a second cousin, but like much
yeah,
older than me, who was named Buffalo Ed because he had like a huge beard, and he had these two buffaloes that lived on his land in like Michigan. And and he was like a guy who seemed like he had adventures, right? Like the
yeah,
first time I
yeah,
ever came out to Arizona, he like told me about an ex-girlfriend of his that lived in this mountain town. I went and met her, and this, like, there was like a girl he went to high school with in the same high school I went to, but it was like I
yeah,
climbed a
yeah.
mountain to meet his ex-girl, right? It's just like
That's
you
so
have these
great.
people, Buffalo Ed, right? You sort of like, what
Yes.
Buffalo Ed's about, even before you do.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Somehow it's like, yeah, exactly, like that thing that whatever, like, Charles Dickens said about names, that like you get a name and the whole character jumps into your field of view. Like, and it's a mysterious thing, and like, and then when you meet those people for real, that,
Uh-huh.
like, the Buffalo Heads of the world, it's like
Right.
it's like the snake eating its tail. Like, you couldn't have written a more perfect character.
Yeah. I
It's
feel like
so
running around
funny.
with a name like Matt Bell, you're always just like a blank moving through the world. I want to talk to you a little bit about Idaho. Obviously you're from Idaho. You are writing about your home state. You invented this town, Cordelia, and then some of the other locations sort of around
Mm,
it, and it's set at the edge of like a last frontier, maybe in Idaho.
yeah.
Um, how did you carve Cordelia out of the known? Like, what of your Idaho had to get into Weldon's?
Well, there was that I thought it was really important that I know it is I wanted to write about Idaho when I had like the like kind of like the power to do it, and like
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted Cordelia to be a place that was I got deep into some holes of research. I got so deep into like and the research on that a songwriter can come across, in terms of like 1900 early 1900s logging, stuff is limited, especially when I'm on tour. So I found that the stuff that I found I read voraciously, and then I found that it was really important for me to like use those as building blocks for my own place, because I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't, I had the geography of Potlatch, Idaho in my mind, but I also loved Clarkia and I loved Troy, and like these towns, and I thought, well, I'm going to have part of this is going to be a land dispute. So I'm going to name
Mm-hmm.
it after like after King Lear, after from King Lear. So
Oh,
I'm going
that's
to name it
great.
Cordelia, and then Cordelia was like, oh yeah, I know this town. Like I know what it's like now, and I have the imagination to imagine it as it was, 100 years ago. So it was fun to kind of arrive at that, but it took a lot of writing to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it took a lot of false starts in like setting it in places that were real or too real.
Yeah, that sort of finding, um, I think I had a similar thing with Appleseed, writing about a very like a kind of Ohio that doesn't exist, and like I had these real places that were on maps, and they were like trying to write directly at them was not useful. Like it just sort of
Yeah,
like I'll be like, I'll set this scene like in 1804 Zanesville or something. Was like it was
yeah,
just death. Like every time I tried it, it just
yeah,
completely sort of failed. Like I really needed to have like an invented version of it, then gesture to those places like being nearby. Like you could get to Zanesville from where I was writing about, but like like somehow
yeah,
there's a relationship of yours to the real. Like you can get to the real from your place.
yeah.
But yeah.
Right. You get it. Like I mean, there's some books that I've read. I think that I love, like Coming Through Slaughter.
Yeah.
Which is like by um oh
Andache.
Ondaatje, and like where like the world is real and true, and like but the account is of a place that feels like it's just rubbing up against the mythic,
Right.
and it's so wonderful for that reason, because it asks us to do what fiction asks us to do anyway, which is to suspend our disbelief. So that's so fun. It was so
Yeah.
fun to write in that world.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I mean, I think, with the kind of landscape you're talking about and the kind of characters you're talking about, you sort of immediately enter the folkloric by a number of different ways, right? There's sort of the like our ideas about the American frontier, about manifest destiny, about this sort of like lost world of that. These kind of characters that we feel like don't exist anymore, though of course they're still lumberjacks. This sort of I don't know, like a historical past that is like inaccessible to most of us, but we have feelings about, like as Americans,
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and I think there's an interesting to have an emotional relationship to a version of like the country, a version of the West that you like don't have any direct experience of, but it's not that long ago.
No, you're right.
Interesting
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, and that's true. And I wanted Weldon to have like a relationship to the past that was not to say jaundiced, but touched with like a reality of like, he lost his father in this young age, and he faced his own mortality and his own weaknesses in that moment at a young age, and like I wanted to make sure that like that well I just wanted to make sure that he was like that he expressed that as an older man, like
Mhm.
I just wanted that to be like a big part of it.
Yeah, it seems like the reflective almost feels necessary to some extent, right? To like
Yeah,
a link toward the audience, toward us, and then also to let, if this story took place in the present tense from the point of view of like 13-year-old Weldon, like it would be like it would be a different thing. You would lose some of the like the long gaze of sort of regret and sort of myth
Yeah.
on it. It's
Yeah.
more mythic for being remembered, right? Like it's sort of
For
like it
sure.
heightens it in a certain way.
Yeah, and so much fun to write, like in that way, you know, just because in the 19 I feel like that 1920s, the early 1920s is like just at the edge of our memory, you
Yeah,
know, our social memory, and like, and it's at that, in that foggy kind of golden space where all kinds of crazy stuff was happening, you know, but we see it through like very particular lens, and it's fun to play with
yeah.
that lens, you know.
Yeah. You know, as you were saying that, just my grandma's 98 years old, and just she had her 98th birthday
Wow.
this week, right? And you're like,
Happy
so like
birthday.
she's Weldon's age, right? You know, there's sort of this
Yeah.
like my grandma's alive and Weldon was, you know, was born and Weldon's story is happening kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
interesting to sort of within the life of your family, right? You know,
Yeah.
can be it feels distant, but it's touchable.
It's so, I remember growing up, where I grew up, it was this like just a little south of the town of Potlatch, which had the largest timber mill
Okay.
in the country or the world at one point. And I remember, like, by the time I was growing up, it was gone. It was that world was like gone. And but like, you know, the logging roads were there.
Right.
There was still abandoned machinery up in the woods, you know. It was like, it was still very recent, even though it was like 100 years ago, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I really feel that in Arizona, like you go, you know, all the abandoned mines and the hiking trails up
Oh
north are old logging roads, and you can see the pipelines where they were trying to find water up in the mountains, and there wasn't any, you know, because even the mountains here are
wow.
pretty arid,
And
and
they
it's
just
like
walked away.
your recreation is in the sort of like failure of those industries in an
Yeah,
interesting
that's
way.
so interesting. Yeah,
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 yeah, and
yeah.
I'm just out there, you know, taking pictures of trees, right? Sort of
Well,
like,
I was like, yeah, I was really amazed that like in the logging roads, like there's a like an overhang of like pine needles and stuff in there, and the overhang is where like little birds make their nests, and like and like there was like a whole new, uh, you know, thing going on. It was really beautiful. It was a beautiful walk that I just took recently, actually.
yeah,
Yeah.
nice. That's fantastic. I know you're gonna play some music for us, so
Sure.
I thought I would ask a question about music that may lead us in that direction. But one of my favorite devices in the book is the song Somewhere," a tune that's so infectious that anyone who hears it gets consumed by it until they find someone else to pass it on to.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
won't spoil where it ends up because it finds this like perfect sort of beautiful home and sort of metaphorical home. It becomes kind of a haunting in a certain way. But I'd love to hear, did the song
Yeah.
originate inside the novel? Was it something you'd written or were thinking about and kind of folded into the book? You have a more unique ability to sort of merge those two things than most novelists or musicians do. So
Well,
I'd just be curious how that functioned.
I was really, it was just it was like a stroke of good luck that at a certain point I was working on somewhere, and I never like decide what sort of song I'm gonna write. I always just write a song,
Yeah.
whatever. Like, and I was working on this song, and I was thinking, like, you know, I listened to like a lot of fiddle music while I was
Mm-hmm.
writing this. Like, I was like listening to tons of that stuff, and I was there was something about the titles, you know, like that were very evocative to me, like Billy in the Low Ground, or you know, Mississippi Sawyer, or like these great, you know, Sally in the Garden, like these
Mm-hmm.
beautiful names, and they sounded like cocktail names to me, you know, like, and I thought, like, well, I want to like write some songs that feel like they're in this world, but like, but I didn't have any, and so like I wrote somewhere as a kind of a as a theme that I could hear for myself, like that, you know, would carry me through the scenes. And like, you know, I even asked my good friend Sam to play a ragtime version and a
Mm-hmm.
slower version for me, and I used those at times when I was editing, you know, and it was really fun, you know. So it was, but it was fun to work with it because you know yourself, like that kind of feeling of like within the world, the ecosystem of the novel, there's things that work and there's things that belong and there's things that don't. And so it's fun to find other parts, forms of art that fit within that
Hmm.
world, especially when it's just your imagination and it's like there's no real rules. There's just like what you think would work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
I think it took me a long time to sort of learn when I was writing that I try to tell my students about, because it seems so helpful. It's like um you don't have to do the whole same thing for the whole time, or the same process for the whole time. And like sometimes like just making something else in the world that interests you is useful. Like whether it's, telling yourself a story that belongs in your world, or a joke that belongs to your world, or describe, thinking
Yeah.
what kind of art belongs there, what kind of music belongs there. And sometimes actually
Or a
making those
recipe,
things,
you know?
yeah,
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
recipe, absolutely. um
yeah.
the way yeah, and I think that just like having that like change of thought from like plot or from character, and just like making this other thing. um
Yeah.
I teach a class on world building where students have to make for a final project like an artifact from their world, and so like a physical thing, right? But it can be a lot of things. And at least once you had someone sing a song that was like written in this world they've invented, like another planet, right? It's like a song I
That's
wrote
so cool.
in another planet, and here I am singing it like in Zoom class. It was, I mean, it's mind blowing, right? It
That's
just kind of
amazing.
opens something up in a different way.
It does, yeah. You know, I was like, yeah, it's like it really is like trying to like describe smells or whatever, you know,
Yeah.
in a novel. Like you just have to rely so much on people's own imaginations, and that's where things get really fun, I think.
Uh-huh.
You know, like that's like yeah, that's so cool. Wow.
Yeah. That's
That's
what you
like
hand off to the reader or listener, right?
yeah, yeah, and so yeah, it was like, but for me, it was very important to have the song as like a steady current all the way through, and I can play it if you want.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Let's see how this goes. Can you hear that all right? Okay. I love the world, but if I gotta leave it, let me go. Somewhere where a man is free to roam. Cut me loose to wander where a man can be his own. When he's on his own, somewhere. Somewhere there are mountains topped with snow. Somewhere where the wildflowers grow. Somewhere where I know I'll someday go. Someday when I go, somewhere. The wonders of the world are vast and golden in array. I expect I'll visit every single one of them someday. Right up until my time has come and I am called away. I am called away somewhere. Somewhere there are mountains topped with snow. Somewhere where the wildflowers grow. Somewhere where I know I'll someday go. Someday when I go, somewhere. I'll go the four directions and I'll be a hired hand. I'll live out of my saddlebags and I'll live off the land. Right up until my time has come, I'll make my final stand. Finally come to stand somewhere. Somewhere there are mountains topped with snow. Somewhere where the wildflowers grow. Somewhere where I know I'll someday go. Someday when I go, somewhere. Someday when I go, somewhere. Someday when I go, somewhere.
Thank you so much, Josh. That was
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I
Thanks, thanks.
about an hour ago, I was talking to my wife, and I was like, I think a weird thing about these Zoom events that I've just engineered a way to have a solo like Josh Ritter performance where I'll be the only person he can see and he's just gonna sing this song and it'll be I'm like I've invented this like magical, beautiful thing I get to do. Um,
It's so fun. It's so fun. Thank you so much,
oh,
man. That's
such a
amazing.
pleasure.
Oh,
I yeah, no, thank you. It's great. I
yeah.
love it. I feel like I want to have a question about it, but I don't know that I do other than what we've talked about. Really a pleasure and really interesting to think as that gets stuck in my mind, the way that that's also a way of getting stuck in the novel in a way that, you know, like the song is going to
Yeah.
recall that and vice versa. It's a way of extending the effect of the novel in a way that is hard to replicate, maybe.
It felt like like just by chance that I thought of it, and it was once I was like, but I also thought of it at a point in the novel when I was truly like, like like you said, the middle where things are feeling sometimes a little like a little scary, and that was like, well, I'm gonna, if I'm gonna do this, I might as well do this too, and just burn it all down, like,
Uh-huh.
and it worked out.
I want to make sure I say for the audience that Adam at Tattered Cover is going to start feeding me questions from the YouTube chat. So if you're
Oh,
watching
awesome.
on YouTube, feel free to put questions there, and I'll get them and I'll ask them to Josh. Um, you know, while people are thinking about that, I have a first question to ask in a second. I'm really glad you asked your friend to do like the ragtime version of the song because just having someone
Yeah,
else make a version of it makes it outside yourself in a really interesting way. That must have been helpful. Like you're saying, you were listening
it
to it as you're
was.
editing. Having a version you didn't record also seems like it must have been a really surreal thing inside the landscape of the book.
It was great. It was so useful because like well, I was like, I got so like when I performed, and like, which I haven't done for like 18 months or whatever, like there's like, as part of my work, there's like applause.
Right.
It's truly amazing, and like, when I was like working on this book, I was stunned by the lack of applause every day. How quiet it was, and so the chance to like get to share the book, and share with my friend Sam, and like say, this is kind of where I'm going, and can you record a musical version of this
Mhm.
book, it was fun for that reason. Really fun. There's a different experience.
Yeah, what a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. I'm really glad to
Thanks.
know it.
Thank
I'm going to start asking you some of the questions from the
you. Yeah.
audience. We've talked about this a little bit, but maybe we can expand on it a little bit. AK wants to know, do either of you listen to music while writing at all? And if so, how does it shape your writing? Or does it
Mm.
shape your writing?
Yeah. Well, what about you? Like, what do you listen to
I
much?
mean,
Like,
saying I always have music on when I'm writing for the
yeah.
most part. I do read aloud a lot as I'm writing, so like I shut it off when I'm doing that. But I listen to music a lot. Some stuff with lyrics, but often even then I usually like a voice that kind of like sounds like an instrument more than I can hear it. You know, something that is lyric
Hmm.
forward is hard. I listen to a lot of movie scores too. I think like
Oh
they're
yeah.
cinematic already, right? They already are sort of like this like big,
Absolutely.
make things feel big and emotional in a way that seems exciting. And when you were
Yeah.
talking about the song titles, I was thinking like, because they always have that, like the songs are scenes. They're always like
Yeah.
named
Yeah.
after like the thing that happens in the scene. And I'm like,
Yeah.
right. And it feels like they somehow are like it's very useful to have like, here's a piece of music that was used to describe a movement of like story.
Yeah, yeah, that's so cool. That's so true. That's like, and I love that about oh yeah, like the mission soundtrack. That's like
Yeah.
an amazing one to like, with that clear it just sounds, it's just it's so, I have trouble listening to like lyrical stuff, like, when I'm writing, but I can listen to, like the Chopin, like the nocturnes,
Hmm.
or I listen to Bach, something that has a kind of a uh, something that feels like a little tiny bit mathematical. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? I remember with the last record, I listened to a lot of Kid A,
Hmm.
Radiohead, and there was like kind of a fractal quality to it that I liked. And I find that for writing, like it's really good. Maybe it just gets me in the trance a little bit more.
I think that's
Like,
exactly right. Like real, like droney, like electronic instrumental music, like really works for me.
yeah.
When I was writing my first novel, there was a novel by an Icelandic musician, Ben Frost, called By the Throat, that I just listened to over and over and over again. And it was like, I
Yeah.
listened to it so much, it made me feel like a little sick, right? I mean, it was just like, it was
Hmm.
always on, but it was very dramatic in a way that was
Yeah.
useful to me. It made you feel like you were, because some days the prose is not dramatic, right? Some days the
Right.
prose
Yeah.
is like dead, and it still made you feel like you'd had like an experience that day. It was like a
Oh, I
trip.
agree. Yeah, it
Yeah.
feels like you've got like the like some days you've got like the yeah, it's just like you're trying to like raise like Frankenstein's
Right.
monster, like, and you're just like and you, whatever by whatever means
Yeah,
necessary, I will spark you from the grave. And
absolutely.
like and when that happens, it's so nice to have some good music on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Um, from MJ, Josh, the world you create in your books and music are so evocative. Have you ever considered having any of your work adapted to the stage or screen, big or small?
Oh, I think that stuff sounds like so much fun. It
Yeah,
always just sounds like so much enjoyable, like so cool I found with like music when people find a use for it in film or TV or whatever, and it usually like they dovetail it like it's their artistic interpretation of whatever, and I think that's so awesome, so fun. So yeah, totally. Be
yeah. Like
great.
anybody who makes something from your thing feels so great, right? Because like so much of
Yeah.
what we do is, I mean, all books are like dependent on other books, all music's dependent on other music, right? It's like it's all sort
Yeah.
of working with and working from. And it seems like, why wouldn't you want that to happen, you know?
Yeah, it'd be so fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that's like one of the like enjoyable, cool parts of the whole thing is
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
From AE, Josh, did any veteran authors give you some key insights into writing your novels? Were other writers useful to you or helpful to you as you were
Oh
writing?
yeah, I had the good fortune and the trepidation of finding out that Stephen King was going to write the review of my first book, which is like, you know, for in the New York Times, and I thought like this is maybe wonderful and potentially horrible, like
Right.
just the worst, And so, but he one of the things he said was like the villains need to be more villainous, and I thought like Roger, that struck a chord with me. It was not just like a way of saying that they needed to be more villainous. It kind of like gave me a weird like permission to say like, oh well, I can get as weird as I want with my villains, like they can be truly horrendous, and and I don't have to worry about like hurting anyone's feelings, or
Yeah.
hurting my protagonist.
I love that. It's really easy. It's really easy to complain about like critics or reviews or something like that. But like, I
Yeah,
really do feel like the best reviews always feel like people who are either like thinking with you or thinking past you in an interesting
yeah,
way, or people who like get what you're doing in a way that like shows you how to go forward in a certain way. I mean, there really have been people
exactly.
who have written in my reviews like that where I'm like, you're right. I that was a place I flinched, or that was a place that couldn't solve, but now I see it because you helped me think about it, and it is
Yeah.
amazing. Like, and Lyndon's a great villain. Like,
Oh,
like
thank
this book
you,
does
thank
have a
you.
stronger villain than Bright's Passage does.
Well, I think it's important. I think it's important to like. I don't know. I think the reviews are like that is like something important. I mean, I was, when I start working on on an album, or I'm deep in an album, I always am psyched to hear somebody else's listening to it.
Yeah,
Because because you're with this thing for so long that you forget what it's like.
yeah,
And it's like nice for somebody to come in to describe it to you so that you can see where you want to change it a little bit. And like
yeah,
and reviews are like are powerful for that reason. Like and like like I respect people for taking the time. But it's like, and I learn a lot from like
hmm,
from a review like that. That was like that, and that was it taught me something, and I felt very lucky to have that as a personal lesson.
Yeah, yeah, me too. We have one last question right now from Hawken, who said, Josh, have you read Jess Walter's novel, The Cold Millions?
No, I have not, but I've heard of it.
It's really
Like, am
great.
I in for? I'm in for a treat.
I think it's going to be a good match. I think you'll really like it. I think that's a great suggestion,
Okay.
Hawken. It's a beautiful, wonderful sort of book about like labor organizing in, I think in Washington in like a similar time period.
Oh, that's
And
fantastic.
it's really funny and really heartwarming. And I think, yeah, Jess is a great writer. I think you'll really like that. He'd like your book too. Should connect you to if you don't know each
That's
other.
amazing. You know, I like one of the things I was really into with the book that I really couldn't spend any time on for just for the sake of the story that I was telling was the amazing rise of the labor movement in the Northwest. You know, and that was something that I just I just didn't like wasn't able to spend time, but there was so much seasonal labor like, and there was the silver mines and the timber and the agricultural world and the fisheries and it was just like that's something that I'd like to know. I would love to read that book. Sounds
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah, I've always loved too hearing that thing that like I was also interested in this and it didn't belong in this book. You know, you and I were
Yeah,
talking before we got on about how the next book is always in relationship with the book you've written. You know, there's this sort of like
yeah,
one like each book's 1.5 books or something, right? There's sort of a
yeah,
carryover, and it's interesting to hear a little bit about what some of your carryover is.
yeah, yeah.
Is there anything else you know, like the next book I want to write about this, or I want to challenge myself to do this? Is there like a going forward kind of thing that you think might be part of the DNA of the next one?
I think I just needed like the tone of my. I think I have a grand idea of the tone changing. Like
Mm,
there was a tone of Weldon that's very much, you know, Rainier and dill pickles and
yeah.
like, you know, it's just like and the tone and the palette just changes, you know. I'm excited for but like but it's that happens with records too. It's like just because you're a different person when you tell the story. It's like, you
Yeah.
know, it's kind of like that thing where they told you if you like made a face too long and the wind blew differently, your face would freeze. You know, like it's like that. I feel like with books and with records, it's like you do it and occasionally the wind changes and it freezes something, and then you move on and like get frozen, you know, in
Yeah.
a different expression again. Yeah.
Oh, that seems absolutely true to me. There's sort of, you know, wanting to get it and then wanting to get out of it, you know, and sort of like
Yeah.
you know, like both things are sort of,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, I want anything,
Yeah.
I'd give anything to make this perfect. And as soon as it is, it's like, I want out. Yeah,
Exactly.
you don't be trapped in the mode of thought forever, or the mode of singing forever, or the mode of writing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you get bored, and then you like you know you become a medley singer. You know.
Yeah. Well, Josh, thank you so much for this. I know Adam's going to come on
Thank
and
you,
say
man.
some final words, but it's such a pleasure to talk to you always. And
Thank
really,
you.
I'm going to get to say it one more time: the great, glorious, goddamn of it all.
Oh,
It's so good, and I
you're
really
so
hope
amazing. Oh,
you
you're
really
so
enjoy looking at it.
amazing.
Yeah, love it.
Not
Thank you so
only,
much,
yeah,
man.
not only is the book amazing, and I left my copy at the bookstore. I'm at home right now, but I also, I don't know if you could see this. I got this amazing swag,
Oh, you got
Ah,
that.
which is the best
Oh,
book swag I've ever gotten. Just because that goddamn is on it. That's
you're just mailing
that's
books and blades around the country, Josh?
yeah, yeah. You know, like that. You're gonna get one in the mailbox. Be careful,
All right.
reaching in. Yeah.
yeah, I didn't know if I was supposed to share that, but I did. I do want to read two more things. There is Cindy just says you're a great soul. She loves your music. So I just want to say
Oh,
that.
thank you, Cindy. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for everyone who came out to see Josh Ritter talk about his brand new book. Josh, you're going on tour soon. It's a solo acoustic
Yeah,
tour, right? You can get
yeah,
that at Josh's website, joshritter.com. And then I do want to give a shout out to Matt because
yeah. Hell yeah.
he teaches at my alma mater. His book, his current book is Appleseed by Matt Bell. Obviously, that's his name. You can get that at tattercover.com. I put that in the website. And where can we find you? I know, like, Josh, where can we find you on the internet? What's the best way to connect with you?
You know, I'm on the dark web. You know, that's mostly what. No, you can find me at joshritter.com, which is, you know, just it's like and you know, I'm on Twitter and all the places that the many-headed serpent rises from the depths of the dark web. Yeah, but I enjoy. Yeah, so I'm at joshritter.com and all around.
Matt, where can we find you?
Same thing, joshritter.com. Mattbell.com. You can find me on Twitter. Say hi. It'd be great.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know who Matt Bell is, he puts out a great monthly email writing lesson, basically. So subscribe to that if you find it. It's amazing if you're a writer out there. Thank you to everyone at tattercover.com, joshritter.com, mattbell.com. Everyone have a great evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thanks a lot, man. See you later.